If you are listening to my voice now, tell me, silently, where you are. Are you lying in a small room, light leaking in from a street lamp outside? Are you on a balcony somewhere far from my sea, with night air brushing your face? Is it late? So late that the world around you has gone quiet, and only your thoughts are still awake. If you wish, whisper it into the darkness. Your city, your hour, the place where your heart is resting tonight. I will not hear the words, but I will feel the shape of them, because I too am speaking to you from a place far away in time, from a coast that no longer exists as it was, from a life washed long ago into legend. They call me Artemisia of Caria, but before I belonged to war, before I belonged to kings and enemies, and histories written by trembling hands, I belonged to one thing only, the sea. I was born in Halicarnassus, a city that rose from the water in layers of white stone and red roofs, clinging to the slope of the hills like a flock of seabirds, resting on a sun-warmed rock. From the terrace of my childhood home, I could see everything that mattered: the curve of the harbor, the forest of masts and rigging, the restless blue line of the horizon, always shifting, always calling. My first cradle was not wood, it was a horizon. My father was a man carved by salt and wind. When he walked through the streets, the smell of tar and sun-baked rope seemed to follow him like a cloak the sea had thrown over his shoulders and refused to take back to others. He was a commander, a ship owner, a man of influence. To me, when I was small, he was simply the tallest, warmest thing in my world. He would lift me and set me on the low wall of the terrace, one hand always around my waist, and point out to sea. Look there, little wave, he would say, his beard brushing my hair. Tell me what you see. At first, I saw only color, a shining sheet of blue, ripped and mended by the wind. But he taught me to look deeper. See that lighter band, he would murmur. That is where the water runs shallow over hidden sand, and those darker patches, those are deep channels. That line of foam far out, that is where two currents are struggling with each other. His finger traced invisible paths in the air. The sea is never just one thing, Artemisia, he told me. It is many moods layered together. You must learn them as you would learn the moods of a person you love. Look long enough, and they will speak to you. So I learned. Some children learn letters. I learned waves. My grandmother said I had been born in the middle of a storm. She liked to tell the story on evenings when the sky outside darkened and the lamps were lit one by one, turning our rooms into small islands of gold. The day she came, she would say, her old hands busy with wool or herbs. The wind beat itself against the shutters. Rain rattled like thrown pebbles. The midwives were afraid the roof would lift, and then here she would lean closer to me, eyes bright. Then there was a crack of thunder so loud, I thought the gods had split the sky to look in, and you cried out at the same moment. As if answering them, she would smile, pat my cheek. You were not a soft child of spring, little one. You came with lightning in your lungs. I pretended to pout, but secretly I was proud. There are worse things to be born with than lightning. My mother was different from my father in every way. Where he was wind and noise and laughter that spilled into every corner, she was stone and shadow and silence that understood more than it ever said. Her hands smelled of crushed herbs and clean linen. She knew the language of fevers, of broken bones, of grief. People came to her with wounds they did not show to the physicians. A girl who had lost a child, a man who had lost a brother at sea, a widow whose hands would not stop shaking. My mother would sit with them in the cool shade of the inner courtyard, listening until their words ran out. Then she would place a hand over theirs and simply breathe with them until their own breathing slowed. You cannot fight every storm, she once told me when I was angry at the world for some childish injustice. But you can stand beside those who are caught in it until the worst of the wind has passed. From my father, I learned courage. From my mother, I learned endurance. The sea has both. So did I. Though I did not yet know it, I remember the first time I went down to the harbor alone. I was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, too young to be trusted by sensible parents, with the chaos of a working port. But curiosity does not ask permission. It simply walks. I slipped out of the house while the afternoon shadows were long, when my grandmother's back was turned and my mother was busy counting jars in the storeroom. The streets were warm under my bare feet. Vendors called out their wares: figs, olives, dried fish, bolts of cloth, bright as spilled dye. As I came closer to the water, the air changed. It grew heavier, salt-sweet, fermented with tar and sweat and seaweed. Men shouted to each other from decks and quays. Ropes creaked, sails snapped, gulls wheeled overhead, crying sharply, their wings flashing white against the sun. To anyone else, it might have seemed noisy. To me, it was a kind of music. I walked slowly along the pier, trying to make myself small, to be a shadow and not a child, so no one would send me home. I watched sailors roll barrels down gangplanks. I watched a scribe tallying cargo with a wax tablet and stylus. I watched a group of men huddled over a rough map, their brows furrowed, fingers jabbing at the inked coastline. And then I saw my father. He was standing on the deck of his largest ship, one hand on the rail, eyes narrowed against the light as he watched the rigging being adjusted. I felt a sudden, irrational shame at being there without permission. I turned to slip away. Artemisia, he called without even looking. I froze. Slowly, I turned back. How did you know it was me? I asked as I climbed the gangplank, cheeks burning. He smiled, deep lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. The harbor has many sounds, he said, but only one small pair of feet that try so hard not to be heard. He ruffled my hair. You could have been thrown into the water by a careless porter. He scolded gently. You could have been crushed by a rolling barrel. But I wasn't, I said. He laughed. No, you weren't. Perhaps the sea knows you already. He put a hand on my shoulder and turned me toward the open water. Since you are here, he said, you may as well learn. That was the first day I set foot on a ship under sail. The wind caught our canvas like the breath of some invisible giant. The hull tilted. My stomach fluttered. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt something inside me click into place, like a key finally finding its lock. This, I thought, this is what movement is meant to feel like. Years passed differently beside the sea. Inland, people count them by harvests. We counted them by waves, by seasons of gentle waters and rough ones, by how many times the storms tore the masts, and how many times we raised them again. My father grew a little more lined around the mouth, a little more gray at the temples. My mother's hair, once dark as wet earth, began to show threads of silver like moonlight in water, and I grew taller, less child, more question. At 13, I knew the names of every headland and harbor along our coast. I knew how to read the color of a sky at sunset and say whether the next day would be kind or cruel. I knew the subtle language of oars, lifting and dipping in perfect rhythm. I knew the tension in a rope that meant it would soon fray. I knew the taste of salt when the wind changed direction. I thought I knew the sea. I did not yet know what it could take. My father's last voyage was not meant to be dangerous. No one ever says, "This is the journey where I die." They say, "I will be back soon." Put aside that jar, that story, that kiss. We will finish it when I return. He was heading only to a nearby port, a matter of days, not weeks. I watched from the terrace as his ship pulled away, sails swelling, water curling white around the prow. He raised one arm in farewell, a dark shape against the brightness of the morning. I raised mine in answer. The wind carried the sound of his voice faintly to me. "Take care of them, little wave," he called, meaning my mother, my grandmother, the house, meaning everything that was his chore when he was not at sea. "I will," I shouted back, though I knew he could not hear the words. The ship turned, the hull swung, and then it was only a silhouette, and then only a speck, and then only a memory on the horizon. That night, the air was too still. The next day, clouds began to gather, thin at first, then thicker, heavier, darker, piling up on the horizon like grief. By evening, the wind had turned harsh. By dawn, the storm had arrived. Rain hammered our roof. Thunder growled, a deep, continuous sound, like a beast pacing an invisible cage. Lightning split the sky, dragging jagged lines of white across the black belly of the clouds. The waves in the harbor rose and beat themselves against the walls. Spring sought high into the streets. Ships strained against their moorings, and out there, beyond the shelter of cliffs and harbor walls, somewhere in that furious gray, was my father. I stood on the terrace, rain soaking my hair, my dress clinging to my legs, refusing to go inside. "Come back," I whispered into the wind. "Come back. You said this voyage was nothing. You said it was easy. You said the storm did not answer. It only roared." They found his ship days later, or what was left of it, a broken thing half buried in sand, on a lonely curve of coastline. The hull split, The mast shattered, the seaweed tangled around frayed ropes. Like mourning ribbons, some bodies washed ashore, some did not. The sea does not return all it takes. My mother went silent for 3 days. No tears, no screams, just a stillness so deep it frightened even the gods. I think on the 4th day she took my face in her hands. Her eyes were not red, they were clear, hard as polished stone. Listen to me, Artemisia, she said. Your father loved the sea. He knew its hunger. He went anyway. We will not curse the thing he loved. We will not build our lives on bitterness. My throat closed. I don't want the sea. I whispered. I want him. You cannot have him, she said simply, but you still have yourself. Her thumbs brushed the rain salt from my cheeks. Not sure if it was water or tears. Remember this, she said. The sea does not take only, it also makes. It made your father. It is making you. She let go. From that day, we spoke of him without hiding his name. The sea had taken his body, but it had given me something too. It had given me the knowledge that nothing in this world is truly safe. Not ships, not men, not childhood. And that knowledge is where power begins. I became quieter after my father's death. Not softer, just sharper. Silence is a whetstone. I watched more, listened more, to the merchants arguing over prices in the agora, to the sailors grumbling about taxes and broken oars, to the officials who came with scrolls and seals and polite threats, to the way people's voices changed when they spoke to those above them and to those below. I began to see patterns. Who deferred to whom? Who pretended respect while hiding resentment? Who smiled too quickly? Who never smiled at all? My mother saw it. You look at people the way your father looked at the sky, she said one evening, as she sorted dried herbs into clay jars, as if you are testing what weather they will bring. Am I wrong? I asked. She shook her head. No, she said softly. You are not wrong. You are simply no longer a child. I didn't feel like anything else yet. Not a woman, not a leader, not a thing with a name. Just a space where something was forming. In cities like ours, daughters are seldom left to write their own futures. The ink is prepared for them. So when my mother told me I was to be married, I did not protest. She sat across from me in the cool of the court, hands folded neatly in her lap. He is a man of Caria, she said. Land, ships, influence at court. Not cruel, not foolish. Old, I asked. Older than you, she replied, as most husbands are. I looked at the mosaic floor, little stones arranged into pictures, fish, waves, vines. There was a flaw in one corner where a stone of the wrong color had been set. It bothered me more than the news of my marriage. Do you want this? I asked her. She considered the question. I want you to be safe, she said. As safe as anyone can be in a world like this. I want you to have a house that listens to your voice. I want you to have a place from which to look at the sea and not always be at its mercy. And love? I asked because I was still young enough to think it might matter. Love can grow, she said. Respect must be there already. Do you respect him? I asked. In some ways, she answered. In some, I do not. That is not comforting, I murmured. It is not meant to be, she said. It is meant to be honest. I appreciated that. Even then, honesty is a rarer gift than happiness. My husband-to-be was named not by the gods, but by his grandfather. He was not handsome in the way poets like to describe. No luminous eyes, no shining curls, no heroic shoulders. He was solid, like a wall built to keep out wind. Not beautiful, useful. He smelled of parchment and oil, and the faintest trace of wine, even when he had not been drinking it. He spoke carefully, as if each word were a coin. He did not wish to spend wastefully. In the early days, I did not dislike him. I did not love him. I observed him. He asked me once, over figs and cheese in the shaded upper room, what I missed most about my father. The way he heard the sea, I said. And you? He asked, what do you hear? People, I answered. He considered that. Which is harder? He asked. People, I said without hesitation. The sea does not lie. He almost smiled. Then we will get along, he said. I prefer numbers. Numbers do not lie either. He was wrong. Of course, numbers lie very well, especially in the hands of those who arrange them. But I did not argue. Not then. I was still finding the edges of the space I occupied. In his house, in his affairs, in his shadow, marriage did not make me weaker. It gave me rooms to walk in, letters to read, conversations to overhear that I would never otherwise have been given. While my husband spent afternoons at the council, I spent them at the low table in his office. Scrolls spread around me, ship registries, tax records, lists of debts, owed and debts forgiven, always more of the first than the second. I traced my fingers along the ink. Here was the skeleton of our city, not in marble, but in obligation. From the terrace of my new home, I could still see the harbor, the same line of horizon, a little higher now, framed by different columns. I watched the ships come and go, and knew, far better than before, which belonged to whom, which carried grain, which carried wood, which carried soldiers. And slowly, without noticing when it began, I started to think like someone for whom the movements of ships were not just fascinating, but consequential. If this ship is late, that merchant will be angered. If that cargo spoils, those families will go hungry. If this tax is raised, those men will shout in the agora. If that one is forgiven, this man will owe us loyalty. Threads. Everywhere I looked, threads, and I was learning where they were knotted. Our son was born on a night of calm. No storm, no thunder, only the slow, steady breathing of the sea beyond the city walls. When they placed him in my arms, his skin smelled of milk and salt and something new, something that did not yet have a name in any language. He was small, but his grip on my finger was fierce. Like you, my mother said. Like him, I whispered. Thinking of my father, my husband looked down at the child, as one might look at a map of a land he had heard existed, but had never expected to see. He will inherit much, he said, voice low with something like awe. Yes, I replied, more than he understands. We named him after an ancestor, whose stories were still told at feasts. Names, like ships, carry more than they appear to. When he slept, I would sit beside him and watch the rise and fall of his tiny chest, feeling an unfamiliar kind of fear. Not the fear of storms, not the fear of blades, the fear of loving something the world might take. Grow strong, I would whisper. Grow wiser than we were. Grow into a man who knows when to walk away from a war and when to walk directly into it. He did not, of course, understand, but the words wrapped themselves around him like a second blanket. My husband's death came not with drama, but with a slow unraveling. No battle, no assassin in the dark, no grand accident in the harbor, just a fever that would not break. He lay in his chamber, sweat soaking the linen, eyes glassy, breath rasping. Physicians came and went. Some muttered about bad air. Some muttered about offended gods. None could stop what was happening. I sat by his bed, the light from the oil lamp carving deep hollows in his face. Artemisia, he said once, in a rare moment of clarity. You understand the ledgers? Ah, yes, I said. You understand the captains, the contracts. Yes, you understand the men who would like to take everything if they smell weakness. Yes, I whispered. He smiled faintly. Good, he murmured. Then you will not let them have it. His fingers tightened weakly around mine. You are not a gentlewoman, he said. It is fortunate. He laughed once, a dry, rasping sound. Then he stopped. The room fell very quiet. I listened for his breath. It did not come. Outside, I could hear waves breaking very softly against the shore. In the days that followed, our house filled with the sounds of formal mourning. Women wailed. Men spoke in low voices about arrangements, about inheritance, about guardianship. They spoke about me as if I were not in the room, a widow, still young, with a child, with properties at stake, with ships her father left, and ships her husband added. Words, 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 all of them trying to shape my future. Without asking me to open my mouth, on the third day, I went into my husband's office. The room smelled the same: ink, oil, old parchment, but the air felt hollow. I closed the door behind me. The scrolls were still there, the ledgers, the lists of names and numbers I knew as well as I knew my own hands. I stood in the center of the room and let my fingertips brush the nearest table. You wanted me to keep this, I said into the silence. No one answered, so I answered myself. I will. I sat down. One by one, I unrolled the records. I read until my eyes ached, and the lamplight blurred the ink. I traced the flows of silver and grain and men. I saw exactly where our strength lay, where we were vulnerable, who owed us favors, who would turn against us the moment they smelled weakness. When dawn began to lighten the windows, I was no longer a widow sitting in a dead man's office. I was something else. I did not yet have a title for it, but I could feel it, a center of gravity, shifting. Power does not always arrive with a crown. Sometimes it arrives quietly, on a night when everyone else is asleep, in a room full of ink and figures, and the whisper of turning pages. Sometimes it arrives when you realize that if you do not seize the helm, the ship your life is tied to will be steered by hands you do not trust. That morning, I rose from the table, my back stiff, my fingers stained with ink. I went to the terrace. The sea below was calm, a pale blue sheet shivering gently. Very well, I said to it, to you, to him, to myself. I will not be carried any longer. I will steer. The sea did not cheer. It did not offer blessing. It only breathed in and out as it always had, but I felt something in myself breathe differently, deeper, and that was enough. So understand this, you who are listening to me in the dark. I did not begin as a queen of ships and war. I did not begin as a legend whispered in the halls of kings. I began as a girl on a terrace, watching storms roll in, losing the man she loved, finding in the ruins they left behind a shape of power that frightened those who thought the world should stay as it was. I was born of storms, but it was grief that sharpened me, and it was choice, cold, quiet, deliberate, that set my feet on the path that would carry me into the heart of an empire and the mouth of a battle they still speak of when the lamps burn low. That is another tide. I will tell you about it, but not just yet. For now, rest a little in this beginning. A girl, a sea, a father lost, a husband buried, a child sleeping in the next room, and a woman standing at a window as dawn touches the water, saying softly to no one and to everything, I will not drown. When a man dies, the world shifts a little around the hole he leaves behind. But when a man with ships and land and the influence dies, the world does not shift. It circles. It circles like vultures. It circles like sharks. It circles like men who smell opportunity, the way wolves smell blood, frozen under snow. My husband had been gone only 7 days when the first of them came, not with weapons, not with threats, worse, with sympathy, patrons, cousins of distant cousins, merchants pretending to offer condolences, councilmen with soft voices and sharp eyes. They sat in my courtyard, sipping my wine, offering to help, offering to guide, offering to relieve me of responsibilities, now that I was surely overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. Women are always overwhelmed, even when the room is shaking because of their heartbeat. I listened to them politely. Listening is a blade. They spoke of tribute quotas, and the king's expectations, and the fragility of the city, and the danger of leaving ships in the hands of someone so recently widowed, someone so young, someone whose son was still a child, someone who, behind their gentle tones was clearly assumed to be breakable. When the last one left, I closed the courtyard gate myself. The lock made a soft click, a sound I would remember for years. Then I went back inside. My mother was waiting, hands folded, face unreadable. "They want your ships," she said. "Yes, they want your contracts. Yes, they want to decide who you marry next." I met her gaze. "No," I said, "that they will not have." She studied me for a long time. Her eyes softened, just barely. "You sound like your father," she murmured. "No," I said quietly, "I sound like myself." A widow is expected to appear small. So, on the morning I went to the city council, I wore no jewelry, no elaborate braid in my hair, no cloak meant to impress, only a simple girdle, a plain dark dress, and a steady spine. The council chamber was carved into white stone, columns rising like ribs of a massive creature, long dead but still honored. Men filled the semicircle around the central floor where I stood, most of them older, some powerful, some sly, some waiting for me to misstep so they could claim the pieces. The presiding official cleared his throat. "Lady Artemisia," he said, "we extend our condolences." His voice was smooth, practiced, insincere. I bowed my head, a gesture without surrender. "Your husband served Halicarnassus well," he continued, "and his holdings are substantial. Ships," another councilman said, "warehouses, contracts with merchants from Cyprus to Lydia." Another added, "influence at court." Another murmured. Each word was a weighted stone thrown into a still pond, waiting to see how I would ripple. "And it is our duty," the presiding official said, "to ensure these assets do not fall into disarray." I let a heartbeat pass, then another. "Disarray?" I repeated softly. "I have seen the ledgers. They are not in disarray." A low murmur, some surprise, some annoyed. The presiding official tried again. "Be that as it may, you are alone now. Resources must be overseen. Decisions must be made by council guidance." "Guidance?" I echoed. "Yes," he said. "We believe it wise to appoint a steward to manage your late husband's properties until such time as your son comes of age." I let the silence settle between us, like dust settling in sunlight. "And who," I asked, "would you appoint?" Another councilman cleared his throat. "We have several candidates." "No," I said. The word fell like a dropped shield. "Lady Artemisia," he began, "surely you understand." I stepped forward onto the central stone. "My husband trusted me," I said. "He trained me. He taught me the ledgers, the contracts, the captains, the tax codes, the harvest cycles. He placed our affairs in my hands long before he died." "Even so," someone muttered, "a woman cannot." I turned my head. My voice stayed soft. "A woman cannot what?" He swallowed, looked away. The presiding official sighed. "Our concern is not ability." He lied. "It is propriety and precedent." "Precedent," I murmured. I raised my eyes to the whole chamber. "Tell me," I said, "when a man dies, who inherits his holdings? His son?" Several voices answered, and when the son is too young, his closest male relatives, the presiding official said. And if the relatives are incompetent, or corrupt, or too eager for gain, uneasy shifty, I stepped fully into the center of the hall, my voice lifting just enough to reach every ear. My husband's holdings belong not to his cousins, not to the council, not to men waiting to fatten themselves on his absence. I paused. They belong to me. The chamber stilled. Some looked outraged, some impressed, some calculating. The presiding official frowned. And by what right? He asked slowly. Do you claim this authority? I lifted my chin. By the right of competence, I said. By the right of knowledge, by the right of a promise he made to me. With his last breath, gasps, soft, sharp, scandalized, a councilman sputtered. We cannot govern by sentiment. This is not sentiment, I cut in. This is continuity. They stared at me. I stared back. At last, the presiding official leaned back in his seat, and for the first time, he looked at me, not as a widow, but as a force. Very well, he said slowly. We will grant provisional stewardship, murmurs erupted. For 3 months, strict oversight, reconsideration possible. I raised one hand. The room fell silent. You will grant stewardship, I corrected, without condition. His jaw tightened. And why? He asked. Would we do that? Because, I said quietly, if you deny me, you deny the wishes of a man you all respected. You deny stability. You deny reason. I let the next words fall like anchor chains. And because if you push me aside, I will not bend. I will become your problem instead of your solution. Silence. Fake. Heavy. The presiding official exhaled. Very well, he said. Lady Artemisia will retain full authority over her husband's holdings. It was done, not by force, not by begging, by clarity. When I walked out of the hall, men bowed, not deeply, not warmly, but they bowed. Respect born of recognition, not affection. My mother was waiting outside, hands folded in her sleeves. She studied my face. You have won, she said. No, I murmured. I have opened the door. Winning comes later. She nodded. You will be alone in this. I know. You will be resented. And I know. You will be feared. I looked toward the harbor. The masts were dark silhouettes against the bright water. Good, I said softly. Fear is easier to work with than pity. My mother smiled faintly, as if she had known this answer before I spoke it. Come home, she said. There is food waiting, and your son is asking for you. That evening, after my son was asleep, I returned to the office. I lit a single oil lamp. The flame trembled, as if excited by the ink it was about to illuminate. I spread the ledgers out, opened the scrolls, marked the weak points, circled the opportunities, crossed out the names of men who had tried to manipulate me. I called for the captains and met with them one by one, until the moon climbed high. They were surprised, then curious, then respectful. By midnight, they began addressing me, not as my lady, but as commander. The word settled into the room, like a stone finding its place at the bottom of a river. Softly, permanently, when the last of them left, I stepped out onto the terrace. The sea breathed in the dark. Tomorrow, I whispered, you and I begin a different war, not with swords, not yet with ships, a quieter war, a political war, a war of influence and truth, a war I intended to win, because the weight of a crown is not felt when you place it on your head. It is felt when you refuse to let anyone else carry it. The summons came at dawn, in the cool hour before the streets of Halicarnassus, filled with voices and commerce. A royal courier stood at my gate, his horse trembling with exhaustion, its flanks streaked with dust from hundreds of miles. He bowed deeply when he saw me. Lady Artemisia, he said, the great king commands your presence in Sardis. At once, not requests, commands. The scroll he handed me bore the seal of Xerxes, a lion rising, sun rays unfolding behind it. Like a crown of fire, I broke the seal. The script was bold, decisive, written by a man who expected oceans to part for him. Artemisia of Caria, the empire prepares for war. Your counsel is needed. That was all. 6 words that shifted the ground beneath my feet. My mother, standing beside me, read my expression before she read the scroll. You will go, she said. Yes, you will not return the same. No, she nodded, as if this was the fate she had been waiting for since the day I was born. Then take your son's hand now, she said quietly, because when you see him again, you may no longer belong to this house. Her voice did not tremble. Mine nearly did. My son woke as I packed. Small hands reached for my sleeve. Mother, where are you going? I knelt beside him, pressed a kiss to his forehead. To speak to a king, I said. Will he listen? The innocence of the question pierced deeper than any blade ever would. He will, I whispered, or he will wish he had. He wrapped his arms round my neck. Come back, he murmured. I will, I said, stronger, whether that was a promise or a warning. I did not yet know. The roads of the empire were broad and smooth, built to carry armies faster than thought itself. Caravans passed us in long columns. Horses, camels, wagons, stuffed with grain, Persian soldiers with polished spears, messengers wearing the king's royal colors. The closer we rode to Sardis, the more the land changed. Fields turned golden. Hills rose sharp and ancient. The air thickened with the scent of cedar and incense from roadside shrines. At night, I listened to the murmur of soldiers at campfires, their tongues weaving a tapestry of 100 tribes. Medes, Parthians, Assyrians, Carians, Egyptians. An empire is not one voice. It is a storm. And I, the daughter of storms, rode calmly into its center. Sardis. Sardis rose before us, like a dream carved from stone. Terraced palaces gleamed in the sun. Columns soared high enough to challenge the sky. The great citadel crowned the hill like the helm of a warrior god. Persian banners rippled from every balcony, deep blue embroidered in gold. The city smelled of cinnamon, smoke, and power. Inside the gates, people stepped back as I passed. Some curious, some wary, some whispering the stories of me that had begun to travel faster than my own horse. That is her, the widow who commands ships, the woman who reads ledgers better than priests read omens. She does not bend. She is favored by the sea. She is dangerous, dangerous. I wore the word like a sash across my shoulders. Before meeting Xerxes, I was led to the palace of Artemisia, the satrap of Lydia, a man with a reputation as smooth and sharp as polished obsidian. He greeted me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Lady Artemisia, he said, Halicarnassus sends its finest widow, always that word, and Sardis, I replied, keeps its finest shadows. A few of his advisers choked on their breath. The satrap's smile widened. Yes, he said softly, I see why you were summoned. He led me through long hallways, lined with towering reliefs, winged bulls, lion-headed gods, kings with beards like waterfalls of stone. We passed rooms full of scribes, bent over tablets, soldiers polishing armor, priests burning incense. Every doorway watched me, every corridor whispered, and still I walked as calmly as if I were crossing my own courtyard at home. Power smells the same everywhere. Fear smells even stronger. Dawn rose pale and cold, a thin sheet of light sliding over the islands, as if the sun itself hesitated to witness what was about to unfold. The sea lay strangely quiet, too quiet, as if it were a drum-skin stretched tight. My men stood ready, hands braced on oars, eyes searching the horizon for signs of Greek sails, or omens, or mercy. None appeared. I stepped to the prow of my flagship, my cloak snapping in the early wind, and looked toward the narrow throat of water where the Greeks waited, or rather, where they lured us. Even then, before the first oar dipped, I could feel it. A trap is not a place. A trap is a decision, and someone had already made theirs. The admirals insisted we advance, crush them, drive them against the rocks. They are cornered, finish it. The king, watching from the cliff above, relied on their pride more than their wisdom. I knew this. I felt it, and still the sea said nothing. The Phoenician ships surged forward first, oars biting the water in disciplined fury. Persian vessels followed, then Egyptian, then countless others. A flood of wood and bronze and ambition. Too many, far too many. The strait narrowed ahead of us, like the neck of an hourglass, and time was already slipping. I moved beside my helmsman. Hold back, I told him quietly. He paled. My lady, the others. I said, hold back. A commander who survives a war is one who knows when to ignore men and listen to water. For a long moment, there was nothing, just the swell of oars, the heavy breath of 1,000 rowers, the creak of tightened ropes. Then, from the shadows of Salamis, they came. At first, they looked like fragments of darkness, detaching from the coastline. Then sunlight hit bronze, sails unfurled, war cries split the air, dozens, then hundreds. A wave of Greek triremes swept out of the hidden inlets, their timing perfect, their formation impossibly tight. My heart dropped, not from fear, from recognition. This, I whispered, is the trap. Greek commanders had waited until the Persian vanguard entered the choke point, until our own numbers strangled us, until our ships blocked our maneuvering. Then they struck, not at us, at our formation, at our arrogance, at our blindness. The sea around us erupted into chaos. Greek ships slammed into our front lines with the precision of a blade driven into soft flesh. Their bronze rams hit hulls at perfect angles, splintering, opening, gutting. Phoenician captains shouted orders that no man could hear over the thunder of colliding wood and the screams of splintering beams. Oars snapped, masts toppled, men went overboard, the sea closing over their armor, like a grave shutting its doors. I watched it unfold, exactly as I had warned. The strait tightened around us. Ships trapped behind could not advance, could not retreat, could not breathe. They crushed each other before the Greeks even reached them. This is how pride kills armies, not with swords, with pressure. At last, one of my officers ran to me. Lady Artemisia, they are signaling for us to advance. Of course they were. The admirals, furious, flailing, drowning in their own incompetence, wanted reinforcements. They wanted us to join the slaughter. No, I said. The officer blinked. But, my lady, if we advance, we die. If we hold, we survive. His breath shook. But the king is on a cliff. I snapped. He cannot see the water the way I can. The officer hesitated, waited. I narrowed my eyes at the chaos before us. Greek ships darted between ours, like wolves among cattle. Persian vessels smashed one another in blind effort to turn. Screams rose from every direction. And then, through the nightmare, I saw an opening, a small gap, thin, brief, but real. Helmsman, I said, turn us east. East? He gasped. That takes us toward. Do it. He obeyed instantly. We slid sideways, cutting away from the crush, just as two Persian ships collided. Where we would have been, I felt their impact shake the water beneath us. My crew stared at me as if I had banned physics. Row, I ordered. Fast, hard. Now, and like that, we broke free of the killing ground, but not completely. A ship was on us, a Persian ship. I recognized its pennant, a nobleman who despised me, a commander who had argued against my presence, a man who would rather sink me than let me outmaneuver him. He thought I was fleeing. He thought I was betraying them. He was coming fast. If he rammed us, we were finished. Behind him, a Greek trireme followed, closing like a predator. Sensing weakness, I had seconds. Lady. My helmsman whispered, what do we do? I drew a breath so sharp, It felt like it cut my ribs from inside. Turn toward him. The crew froze. What? Turn toward him. The helmsman obeyed, hands trembling on the steering oar. Our prow swung sharply. The Persian ship did not expect it. He thought we would flee. He thought we would panic. Instead, we slammed into him. Square, brutal, perfect. Our bronze ram tore into his hull, splintering his side wide open. Men toppled into the water, screaming. Boards snapped like bones. My own men were stunned. But my lady, that was one of ours. No, I whispered, as the Greek ship behind us veered away, confused. That was survival. The sea sucked the nobleman's ship into itself, dragging it down in foaming circles. We sailed past the wreckage like a knife slicing through silk. Above us, on the distant cliff, I knew the king watched. He saw a Persian ship sinking. He saw me sailing away, untouched. Men would interpret that sight in many ways, some as betrayal, some as brilliance. But I knew the truth. The Greeks had set the trap. I had refused to die in it. For hours, the battle raged behind us. I heard the screams, the crashes, the crack of oars, the terrible groaning of ship hulls, being torn apart by forces they were never built to face. I did not look back. A commander cannot save a battle that was lost long before a single ship launched. But I could save my men, my fleet, my future, and I did. We emerged from the far edge of the chaos. As the sun began to lower, its light turning the water red, as if the sea itself were bleeding. That night, we anchored far from the battlefield. My men moved silently, haunted by what they had seen, grateful for what we had escaped. I washed my hands in a basin of salt water to remove the splinters and blood from the rail where I had braced myself. The water turned pink. The moon rose. I looked out across the dark sea. Somewhere behind me, the king counted losses. Commanders argued. Blame circled like vultures. But I felt only stillness. The kind of stillness after a great storm, when the world tries to understand what has survived. I whispered to the night. They thought the strait would crush me. But storms do not die in narrow places. I closed my eyes, and tomorrow they will learn that I am not finished. The sea breathed in, breathed out, listening, always listening. When dawn rose after Salamis, the sea was still trembling. Debris floated everywhere. Broken planks, splintered oars, oil-slick shadows drifting like memories, too stubborn to sink. The gulls came first. They always do. Then the silence. A silence that cut deeper than the screams of yesterday. We anchored far enough away that my men could pretend the world was not drowning behind us, but I could not pretend. I walked to the prow, the boards still damp beneath my feet, and let the morning wind strike my face. Somewhere beyond the horizon of wreckage, the king would be watching the strait, waiting for news that would disappoint him in ways that only truth can. He would hear the counts. He would see the bodies. He would tally what was left. But he would remember one thing most clearly. My ship emerged when hundreds did not. and he would want to know why men call a choice impossible when they do not want to accept that someone had the courage to make it at Salamis. I rammed a Persian ship, not by mistake, not out of confusion, but deliberately to save my crew, to escape a trap, to deny my enemies the satisfaction of pinning me in, and because sometimes the only path forward is through someone else's ruin. This is the truth no commander should say aloud, but I say it now, to you, because you are only listening in the dark, and not writing histories with trembling hands. I killed my own to keep my promise to those under my command, not a noble act, not a heroic act, a precise act, the kind that decides who survives long enough to be remembered. The sea does not respect men who cling to ideals. It respects those who act. By midday, I saw the king's messenger rowing toward us. A single boat, 2 rowers, a man in royal colors, no banners, no escort, not a summons, a judgment. My officers stiffened. My lady, is this punishment? No, I said quietly. Punishment comes with ceremony. This is curiosity. The messenger climbed aboard, his face unreadable. Lady Artemisia, he said, the king requests your presence. At once. Request, not command. Interesting. I took only my cloak, no armor, no blade. The sea does not dress for explanations. The king had set up his command post on a high cliff overlooking the strait. The path upward was steep and narrow, lined with gods who watched me, with the eyes of men still stunned by the previous day. Some looked hostile, some reverent, some afraid. Good. Fear is not admiration, but it is obedience. When I reached the plateau, Xerxes was standing alone, beside a great stone brazier, the smoke rising in pale coils that twisted in the wind. He did not turn when I approached. He had been watching the water so long that his eyes were the same color as the sea. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, not angry, not broken, just stripped of pretense. Artemisia, he said, tell me what you did. No court, no audience, no accusation, just a question. I stood beside him, close enough to see the faint dust of ash clinging to his fingertips. I survived, I said. His jaw tightened. That is not an answer. It is the only answer, I replied softly. Your admirals walked into a trap. Your commanders drowned each other in their pride. The sea crushed your numbers and rewarded their understanding. I gestured toward the water below. I could not save the fleet, but I could save the men who follow me. So I did. He finally looked at me, and there was nothing soft in his face. Did you sink a Persian ship? Yes. The word cut the air cleanly. He inhaled, slow, sharp, like someone steadying himself before touching something hot. Why that ship? Because it was in my way, I said, and because its commander wanted me dead more than he wanted you victorious. A shadow of recognition crossed his expression. How many men did you kill? He asked. Enough, I whispered, to save 100 others. He closed his eyes. for a heartbeat longer than natural. And do you regret it? He asked. No, the wind shifted. The bridge of smoke blew sideways, wrapping around us like a ghostly cloth. Xerxes opened his eyes, and for the first time I saw exhaustion in him. Not the exhaustion of a body, but of an empire. He stepped closer. You gave me the only honest counsel in this war, he said. They ignored you. I ignored you. He exhaled slowly, and somehow you are the one still standing. I said nothing. Truth needs no applause. Xerxes turned toward the sea again. In Persia, he said quietly, men will write poems of this battle. Some will praise me, some will mock me, some will lie. All of them will be wrong. He lifted his hand and traced the horizon with his fingers, as if trying to redraw it. No one, he said, truly understands what a king sees from this height. I studied him. Kings break under far smaller defeats, but not this one. He carried his failure like a boulder, not crushed by it, just slowed. He turned back to me. I asked you here, he said, because I need those who do not lie to me. He stepped closer. Tell me again, he whispered, what the sea told you yesterday. I met his gaze, that you were walking into a throat, waiting to close around you. And today, he murmured, that the sea does not want you. I said softly, it wants those who listen. He held my eyes for a long, heavy moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, a low, weary laugh of a man who has finally accepted he is not the smartest force in the world. He shook his head. You are the only commander, he said, who fought the Greeks yesterday and came back alive with her ship intact. He stepped even closer. Also the only commander who had refused to flatter him, obey him blindly, or drown for pride. And he respected that. He respected me. Artemisia, he said, you are no longer a subject. The wind stilled. You are my counsel. The words struck harder than any blow. Not advisor, not commander, not guest. Counsel, equal in voice, equal in consequence. I bowed my head, not as submission, as acknowledgement of gravity. You honor me, I said. No, he whispered. I protect myself. You are the only truth I have. When the audience ended, I walked back toward my ship with the weight of a new identity settling over my shoulders. Some men bowed as I passed. Some avoided me. Some looked at me as if I were the omen that had warned them of the storm too late. All of them, in their own way, understood a simple truth. I had done what no commander should do, and I had survived it, not because the gods favored me, not because the king protected me, but because I chose the hardest path, the one cut by storms and sharpened by salt. A choice made not from cruelty, not from ruthlessness, but from clarity. A choice that only someone born from the sea could understand. That night, as the fires burned low and the survivors slept with the ghosts of the day, I stood again at the prow of my ship. The air was cool. The stars held their quiet vigil. The sea glimmered faintly, as if remembering all it had devoured. I touched the railing. Do you regret it? The wind seemed to ask. No, I whispered. I do not, because regret is for those who had choices. I did what the moment required, and it made me something. No sailor, no captain, no poet would ever forget. Not a hero, not a villain, a storm. And storms do not apologize. Morning came slowly, not with color, but with a gray light that made everything look older and heavier. The sea was eerily calm, as if exhausted by the violence of the day before. Waves moved sluggishly, thick with the oil spilled from broken hulls. Burnt fragments drifted past us, planks blackened by fire, ropes torn apart, the occasional sandal or helmet that had belonged to a man whose name no one would write. It was as if the water itself was carrying a funeral procession. My crew worked in silence. Silence is different after a battle. It is heavier. It presses against the ribs. It tastes like iron. I walked the deck without speaking. Men stepped aside for me, not because they feared punishment, but because they feared breaking whatever thin thread held their minds together. The world had changed, and they sensed it. Everyone did, except the sea. The sea already knew. By midday, I reached the shore, where the king had set up his new encampment. Tents of deep red and gold fluttered against the wind. Spearmen stood at attention, their faces drawn, their armor still carrying the grime of yesterday. When I stepped onto the sand, the guards bowed deeper than they had before, not out of affection, out of recognition. The man who announced my arrival did not shout my name. He spoke it softly, as if invoking something sacred. Artemisia of Caria. The wind carried it away, like a whisper into the dunes. I walked past dozens of commanders, some with bandaged arms, some limping, some staring into nothing with the hollow eyes of men who had seen themselves dying and then survived anyway. I searched their faces. Jealousy, resentment, shame, fear. Not one of them met my eyes fully. Even those who despised me most knew one undeniable truth. I had survived the place where they had been broken, and the king knew it too. His tent was larger than the others, opening onto a view of the sea, as if he wanted to keep his enemy in front of him. Two guards stepped aside. Inside, Xerxes stood alone, hands clasped behind his back, face turned toward the distant horizon, where the Greek ships still lingered like crows over a battlefield. He did not turn when I entered. Artemisia, he said quietly, as though he had been waiting for my footsteps. My king, I replied, and bowed my head. He gestured to the open flap of the tent. Come, stand beside me. I am tired of men who stand behind me. I joined him. The sea rolled gently, almost kindly, a cruel mercy. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Kings do not hide their disappointment well, nor their pride, nor their grief. He finally exhaled slowly, a sound that seemed to drain the tent of all its warmth. I believed He whispered that the world would bow to me. He looked down at his hands as though they were foreign to him. I believed the armies of Darius, my father, would carry me where his shadow could not. He shook his head, but yesterday the world corrected me. The honesty in his voice stilled my breath. Kings rarely speak truth, even to themselves. I studied him, a man born to rule millions, now confronted by a truth no empire could hide. You are not defeated, I said softly. His jaw clenched. Are you mocking me? No. I met his gaze. You are humble, and humility is a beginning, not an end. He studied me as if seeing something he had overlooked. In the place of war, you speak, he murmured, as if defeat cannot reach you. I fear defeat, I said, but I do not fear admitting its presence. He looked out at the sea again. Then speak, tell me what yesterday was. I drew a breath, a warning, I said, a reminder that the sea is not your battlefield. It is theirs. He closed his eyes. A single muscle in his cheek tightened. And what am I, then? He asked. A king who cannot master water? No, I whispered. You are a king who listened too long to men, who treated the sea as a flat surface instead of a living thing. His eyes opened, and something in them shifted. A weight leaving, a truth landing, perhaps both. I stepped closer, close enough for him to see that I did not tremble. Your admirals sought glory, I said. Your general sought reputation. Your commander sought victory. None of them sought truth. And you? He asked. I seek understanding, I replied. And understanding has no loyalty to pride. He inhaled deeply. The scent of smoke and brine mixed in the air. You saved your ship, he said, when thousands of my men did not. I saved my ship, I corrected, because I listened to the sea more than to your commanders. His lips curved, not in amusement, but in a grim kind of relief. I should have listened to you, he murmured. Before we set foot on this cursed shore. Yes, I said simply, and now you know why. Silence again, not heavy this time, not cold, just necessary. At last, Xerxes turned fully to me, his voice lowered, as if asking a question that had no place in the mouth of a king. Artemisia, he said, what would you do if you were me? The tent seemed to still. Even the sea outside paused. I did not speak quickly. Kings deserve truth, not speed. I looked at him, a man draped in crimson, a man born into worlds of obedience, a man shaken by the first thing in his life that refused to bow. I would leave Greece, I said. He held my gaze, searching it for cowardice, for weakness, for excuses. He found none. I continued. I would return east, regather strength, rebuild alliances, let the sea close behind us, before it swallows more men. His throat worked, and if they call me weak, let them call you whatever they want, I whispered. The sea does not speak their language. He breathed out slowly, an exhale shaped like acceptance. You are the only voice, he said, that does not tremble around me. No, I said softly. I simply speak from a place where man cannot reach. The sea raised me, not to your court. He lowered his head, a gesture no king should make lightly. But it was not submission, it was recognition. At sunset, Xerxes addressed his commanders. He stood tall against the crimson sky, his voice firm, measured, unchanged in power. Even if changed in certainty, we leave Greece, he declared. We return east. We will not waste the blood of our men on a war that no longer serves the empire. Shock rippled through the ranks. Arguments rose. Faces flushed with shame or fury. He silenced them with a single word. Enough. Then he turned, not to his generals, not to his admirals, but to me, Artemisia. He said, you will escort my sons to Ephesus. I trust them, to no one else. Murmurs, confusion, resentment like smoke, but truth is greater than resentment. I bowed, not as his subject, but as his chosen. I will keep them safe, I said. He nodded once, as you kept yourself. Later, when the campfires burned low, and the sea whispered its ancient songs, I stood alone at the edge of the water. The waves touched my feet like small, cold hands. Behind me, men argued about futures. They did not understand. Ahead of me, the sea breathed, steady, infinite, patient. I whispered into the wind, this defeat is not the end of you, and not the end of me. The tide pulled back, returned, as if answering, not yet. I closed my eyes. Above me, the stars watched silently, unmoved by wars. All kings, all the names of those who survived, and beneath them I stood, Artemisia of Caria, not broken, not victorious, but still here, like ashes on the water, refusing to sink. When Xerxes entrusted his sons to me, I felt the full weight of his defeat, not in the tremble of his voice, nor in the fire of his pride, but in the simple truth hidden beneath his command. A king only gives his children to someone he believes the world cannot break. And so, before dawn, I boarded my ship with the two young princes who carried the future of Persia. In their small, uncertain hands, one was old enough to hide his fear. The other was too young to know how. Both watched the world with the wide-eyed silence of boys who had seen their father stripped of invincibility in a single day. The older one asked me quietly, Lady Artemisia, is the sea still angry? I knelt beside him, so that my eyes were level with his. The sea is never angry, I told him. It simply tells the truth. And yesterday it spoke louder than any man could. He nodded, as if storing my answer deep inside himself, for a time when he might need it. The younger prince tugged at my cloak. Will it speak again? He whispered. Yes, I said softly, and we will listen. We left the king's camp at first light, moving east along the coastline with a small escort of loyal ships. No banners, no fanfare, only the grim efficiency of people who know danger might rise from any shadow. The princes sat near the stern, under a canopy, watched over by nurses and tutors. who tried to pretend this was merely another journey in their education. But the air said otherwise. The air always tells the truth. My officers remained tense, eyes sharp, hands close to blades, breathing shallow. I felt it too, a tightening in the water, a pressure that did not come from wind or current. Tension is a current of its own. By midday, we passed a rocky stretch of coast, where the cliffs leaned over the sea, like old men eavesdropping. My helmsman frowned. "My lady," he murmured, "the escort ships have drifted farther behind." "Too far, not by accident," I said. He swallowed. "You expect danger?" "I expect ambition," I replied. "And ambition is more dangerous than storms." At that moment, the younger prince crawled to my side, his small fingers gripping my sleeve. "Lady Artemisia," he whispered, "are we safe?" I placed a hand on his hair, soft as unspun wool. "With me," I said. "You are safer than anywhere else on earth." It was not a boast. It was a promise, the kind that cuts deeper than steel. The attack came, not as a roar, but as a flicker, a shadow slipping from behind a cliff, moving too fast to be anything innocent. A ship, low, narrow, silent, a predator wearing the skin of a merchant vessel. But I had learned to read the sea long before I had learned to read letters. "Archers," I called. My voice cut through the ship like a blade. Men rushed into position. My lieutenant stared hard at the oncoming silhouette. "Whose colors are those?" he demanded. "No colors," I said. "No allegiance." He paled. "Pirates?" "No." I stepped forward, my pulse steady as a tide. "Assassins." The ship angled sharply, coming for our stir, where the canopy shielded the princess. Its ram gleamed beneath the waterline, a knife aimed not at our hull, but at our future helmsman. I said calmly, "Turn us." "To ram them?" he asked. "No." My voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. "To deny them." We swung sideways at the perfect instant, so close that I could see the whites of the attackers' eyes. They expected fear. They expected scrambling. They expected children screaming and nurses collapsing. They did not expect precision. Our oars rose in perfect unison, cutting water like wings. The assassins misjudged the angle. Their ram scraped our hull, too shallow to breach, too deep to recover quickly. In that single hesitation, I seized the moment. "Now!" I shouted. Our archers unleashed. Arrows flew in tight arcs, not wildly, not with chaos, but with the cold discipline of men who knew. Those children were the future of an empire. 3 attackers fell before they could cry out. 2 more stumbled. The remaining men panicked, trying to steer away. Cowards always panic when they think they've misread fate. "Pursue?" my lieutenant asked. "No," I said. "Let them carry the message of their failure to whoever sent them." He stared. "You want them to live?" "Yes," I said. "Fear spreads faster than fire, and today fear is more valuable than corpses." When I returned to the canopy, The younger prince ran into my arms without hesitation. His small body trembled. He clung to me as if the world had tried to swallow him, and he had grasped the only rock that would not sink. The older prince stood straight, but his jaw was clenched hard enough to ache. "Why would someone attack us?" he asked. I did not soften. "The truth, because you are heirs," I said, "and heirs are always threatened by those who fear the future." He swallowed. "And we survived." "You did," I said, touching his shoulder. "And you will continue to, as long as you learn to trust your instincts more than promises." "And you?" he asked. "What do you trust?" I looked out across the open sea. "The water," I said softly, "and myself." The younger prince whispered into my cloak, "Will you stay with us until we reach safety?" I tightened my hold around him. "I will stay," I said, "and I will not fail you. Not now. Not ever." That night, as torches flickered across the deck and the crew whispered in uneasy circles, I remained awake. The princes slept beneath the canopy, their breaths low, their dreams still thick with fear and innocence. I stood guard, hand resting on the wooden railing, eyes fixed on the stars. The constellations shimmered like stories the world had forgotten to finish, and in that soft darkness, the sea spoke in its quiet language, a language older than empires, older than kings, older than war. It whispered of tides rising, of dangers not yet spent, of futures shaped not by bloodlines, but by choices. And as I listened, I understood one thing with certainty. Protecting those boys would shape the next chapter of my life, and perhaps the next chapter of Persia itself. The sea breathed beneath me. The stars watched above, and I, Artemisia of Caria, stood between the future and the jaws of men who wanted to extinguish it. When we reached Sardis again, the air felt different, thick, perfumed, watchful. A city can smell danger long before its people speak of it, and Sardis smelled like a room where too many secrets had been shut in for too long. The princes were carried into the satrap's palace under heavy guard. Their small faces peeked over the edges of the litters, eyes searching for their father, knowing he was far away, and that only I stood between them, and a world suddenly hungry. I followed behind them, my cloak hooded, my hand never far from the dagger, tucked beneath it, not out of fear, but because I knew this city housed wolves that walked upright and spoke perfect Persian. Inside the palace gates, the satrap Artaphornes waited. Of all the men I had met in the empire, he was the one whose smile had too many meanings, and none of them kind. He bowed to the princess. He bowed to me, but when he lifted his head, his eyes touched mine with the faintest spark of amusement. "Lady Artemisia," he said smoothly, "Sardis welcomes you and the heirs of the empire." The emphasis on heirs was not courtesy. It was threat, a calculation, a reminder that the future of Persia was standing before him, breathing the same air, and that accidents could happen to children who traveled so far without their father. His smile widened. Your journey was peaceful, I trust. Peaceful enough, I said, considering the waters were full of teeth. He raised an eyebrow. I heard there was an incident. Incidents are nothing new to me, I replied. The sea is honest. It always shows its teeth. Men are the ones who hide theirs. Silence, then a single polite laugh, the kind of laugh men give when they are planning where to bury you. That evening, the satrap hosted a banquet in honor of the princes and their brave protector. Flattery floated through the hall like smoke from cheap incense. Silk cushions, golden lamps, musicians plucking soft melodies designed to distract from the tension that vibrated beneath every word. The nobles arrived, with smiles as wide as their sleeves. They bowed to the princess, too deeply, too eagerly. They bowed to me, not enough. I took my place beside the boys, at the long table carved from cedar. My cup remained full, my plate untouched. The satrap approached. You do not eat, he said. I am not hungry. You do not drink. I prefer clarity. His smile sharpened. Do you distrust my hospitality? I distrust everyone's, I said, equally. His eyes glittered. A wise policy, but lonely. Safety often is. He leaned closer, his voice lowering into a thread of silk. Lady Artemisia, you are admired by the king. That is a powerful position. Positions change. Not all of them, he murmured. Some are corrected. The torches crackled. Somewhere in the hall, a musician's note broke, a sharp, sickly sound, like a bone snapping. I looked at the satrap, not blinking. If you intend to correct me, I said softly, you should choose a quieter place. Blood on silk is difficult to wash out. A few nearby nobles inhaled sharply. The satrap only smiled. Halfway through the banquet, a servant leaned toward me. My lady, he whispered, someone wishes to speak to you privately. I did not look at him. Who? He glanced nervously over his shoulder. A man who says you do not know him, but he knows you. Danger coiled around the words, like smoke around a dying flame. I rose. The satrap noticed. Leaving so soon? He asked. I grow tired of music, I said. Music can hide many things. So can silence. I walked away before he could answer. The servant led me through a corridor lined with moonlit windows, past fountains breathing cool mist, and into a courtyard where tall cypress trees stood like sentries guarding secrets. A man waited beneath one of them, not noble, not soldier, not servant, shadow. He bowed deeply. My lady, he said, I come from someone who fears for your life. My life is always in danger, I said. Why fear now? Because, he whispered, your enemies in this palace do not plan to wait. I stepped closer. Who sent you? He swallowed. Someone who believes the princess must not fall into the wrong hands. And what hands are wrong? I asked. He hesitated. You will know them, he said. When they try to remove you. Remove me? My voice remained calm. but I have just arrived. Exactly, he said. Your presence threatens them. Your influence threatens them, and your survival after Salamis terrifies them, because they cannot control me, I said. No, he whispered, because they cannot predict you. I considered him. And you? I asked. Are you here to help me, or to trap me? He bowed again. To help you survive, he said, because if you fall, the boys fall, and if the boys fall, Persia fractures. A soft breeze moved between us, carrying the faint smell of incense, and something else, fear. I stepped back. When will they move against me? Tonight, he said, or tomorrow at dawn. They will not wait longer. I nodded slowly. Then they have chosen their moment. They think so, and I will choose mine. When I stepped back into the banquet, the music had grown louder, as if someone had told the musicians to drown out the sound of their own thoughts. The satrap watched me from his seat, stewed lamb untouched before him, fingers tapping lightly against the stem of his cup. A rhythm, a signal, a message. He thought I had no allies in Sardis. He thought I had no idea what he planned. He thought I would sleep tonight under the same roof as men who wanted me cut from history. I returned to my place beside the princess. The older one leaned toward me. Lady Artemisia, he whispered, you look different. I placed a hand over his without taking my eyes off the satrap. I will protect you, I said softly, no matter what happens. He swallowed hard, but nodded. The younger prince pressed himself against my arm, seeking the kind of safety only truth can give. I held him close, because I knew that tonight or tomorrow morning they would try. They always try when they believe a woman is alone. But I'm not a woman who walks into traps. I am the one who survives them. And when serpents wearing silk decide to strike, they forget I was raised by storms. And storms do not fear snakes. Dawn rose pale over Sardis. The morning they tried to kill me. It is strange how quiet the world becomes. A few breaths before someone attempts murder, as if the air itself is listening. The palace corridors smelled of rose water and warm dust. The musicians had long since stopped. Only the faintest echo of a flute lingered, like a ghost refusing to leave. I knew what was coming. I did not run. I did not hide. I simply waited for the moment that would reveal every serpent coiled behind every smile. They came just before sunrise. 3 of them, cloaked in white, faces calm, as if they were priests come to bless the morning. But their hands told a different story. Hands used to daggers, hands used to striking quickly, hands used to being obeyed. Lady Artemisia, one murmured, the satrap requests your presence. No, I said, he requests my absence. They stiffened, and then the first man moved. He lunged fast, a blur of pale cloth and steel. But storms do not freeze when lightning is near. I stepped aside. His blade passed through empty air. My hand caught his wrist, twisted, broke. The second came from behind, silent, trained, efficient. I moved low, felt the whisper of his blade over my hair, and drove my elbow into his ribs, hard enough to steal every breath he'd ever saved. The third hesitated. Fatal mistake. My dagger flashed. He fell. The others fled. I let them carry their fear. Back to the man who had sent them. Let him understand that I did not die just because he wished it. Let him learn what all men eventually learn. You cannot drown a storm. By midday, I had the prince's packed, guarded, and ready to leave. No music, no procession, only the quiet efficiency of a woman who refuses to let the future of an empire sleep one more night. Near men with shaky loyalties, the older prince looked at me as we stepped toward the waiting litters. Lady Artemisia, he whispered, someone tried to kill you today. Yes, I said simply. Are we in danger? Yes. I replied again, but danger does not decide our fate. We do. The younger boy clung to my cloak, his small voice trembling. Will we be safe? Where we're going? If I am breathing? I said, you are safe. He nodded, with the soft trust only children can give. They did not know how close the world had come to losing them before sunrise. Perhaps it was better they did not. Some truths are too sharp for young bones. As we descended the palace steps, the satrap Artemisia appeared. He wore a robe of blue silk, and a smile sharpened into politeness. You leave so suddenly, he said. Yes, I answered, without your permission. His eyes narrowed, but only for a heartbeat. Then he bowed. Safe travels, he said. I bowed back. May your next attempt, I murmured, be less predictable. His breath caught, his eyelid twitched. It was enough. We left Xerxes before the sun fully crested the mountains, and I did not look back. I never look back at places where I am no longer welcome. The road home smelled of dust and pine and warm earth, a scent I had known since childhood when my father lifted me onto a terrace and taught me how to read the sea. When Halicarnassus appeared on the horizon, its white walls glowing in late afternoon light, its roofs bright as scattered embers, my chest tightened in a way war had never accomplished. This was mine, not as inheritance, not as gift, as conquest, not by bloodshed, but by survival. Surviving is a form of ruling. Few men ever understand. The gates opened before I even spoke my name. Voices rose in surprise, then joy, then disbelief. Lady Artemisia has returned. She is alive. She protected the sons of the king. She faced the Greeks and survived. She faced Persia itself and survived. Nothing can kill her. Children ran behind us. Women touched the prince's hands. Men bowed their heads. And I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Home, not a place, a pulse, a heartbeat that echoed my own. That evening, after the princes were escorted to their chambers, and the city settled into its nightly murmurs. I walked alone down to the water. No one followed me. The sky was painted in deep lavender and rose. The waves rolled slow and steady, touching the shore as gently as a memory returning after years apart. I stepped into the surf, cold, sharp, alive. The sea welcomed me with a long, low exhale, the same sound it had given me when my father died, when my husband died, when the war swallowed thousands and spat me out, untouched. It was not affection, it was recognition. The sea knows its children. I am home, I whispered. A wave lapped against my ankles, soft as a hand pressing into mine. Not goodbye, not hello, something in between. I let the water rise around my feet, let it soak the hem of my cloak, let it speak in its quiet, ancient language. This, I thought, is the only throne that ever mattered to me. Not marble, not gold, not the approval of kings, movement, wind, salt, joys, a crown shaped from storms. Power had followed me, sought me, feared me, hunted me. Men had tried to cut me down in corridors and courts and narrow streets between islands. I survived them all, not because I was ruthless, not because I was chosen, not because the gods favored me, because the sea taught me the only lesson I ever needed. When the world tries to drown you, learn to breathe water. I looked at my city, my son sleeping in his bed, my ships resting in the harbor, my people safe for tonight. Tomorrow would bring new storms. Always. Storms never end. But I no longer fear them, because I was not a queen made by men. I was a queen made by the sea. When I finally turned to leave the water, the tide pulled back, as if bowing, a bow from the only kingdom that ever had the right. I climbed the stone steps of the harbor, as torches flickered to life one by one, illuminating my path. Behind me, the sea whispered, "Return when you are ready." And I whispered back, "I always return, because storms do not end. They simply choose where to rise next." And I, Artemisia of Caria, walked into the night, not as a commander, not as a widow, not as a survivor, but as a legend. The sea had carved from salt and defiance, and refused to erase. You have heard my story now, my storms, my choices, my sea. Before you leave me, answer just one question.